You step onto the cool, damp earth, your boots sinking just slightly into the morning dew. The wind carries a familiar scent, earthy and fresh, with a hint of salt from the distant sea. You pause for a moment, taking in the quiet of the forest surrounding you, its dense canopy filtering the soft rays of early sunlight. All around you, the world feels calm, almost unreal. You can hear nothing but the soft rustling of leaves, the far-off calls of birds, and the faint echo of your breath. This could be the perfect moment to drift into a daydream or maybe even take a nap. But before you do, take a moment to notice this place. Little do you know, a surprising twist is about to disrupt this tranquility. You glance around. There's no rush today. No loud chatter or hustle, no urgency. Just the rhythm of your own heart, the steady tick-tock of time unfolding slowly, as if each second is meant to be savored. You could almost fall asleep right here, lying on this mossy ground, lulled by the peaceful quiet. But of course, today's journey has a twist. Your thoughts of rest are rudely interrupted by a long-forgotten Viking. A man whose idea of nap time wasn't quite the standard afternoon doze we might think of today. Ah yes, the Vikings. Those rugged, battle-hardened folk with beards that could rival the wildest of forests and eyes that looked like they were always on the hunt for something or someone. But did you know that one Viking, from the 9th century, found himself napping in the midst of one of the bloodiest battles in Norse history? Sounds a bit odd. A Viking warrior decided that sleep was more important than, well, not being stabbed by an enemy spear. Before we dive into this bizarre historical moment, here's your story reminder. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more weird bits of history and quirky tidbits you never knew you needed. And hey, let me know where you're listening from. What's the time in your neck of the woods right now? I'll wait and I'll find it. Good? Perfect. Now let's ease it tonight, step by step. The year is 955 AD, and the battlefield smells like wet leather and the iron tang of blood. A scent you might expect in a fight, but this scene is oddly different. While most of the warriors around you are focused, swords drawn, muscles tense, and minds locked into the grim purpose of battle, you notice one Viking, sleeping. In the middle of all this chaos, right there in the mud and blood, this Viking, known to history as Håkon the Good, had decided, for reasons no one truly understood, that it was time for a nap. The sight is so unexpected, it's almost unbelievable. Håkon, unlike many of his fellow Norsemen, wasn't drawn to the endless frenzy of the fight. He thought he could be more useful after a nap. And so, he did what anyone in his sandals would do. He dropped to the ground and took a quick rest right there, perhaps even on his shield, which, let's face it, was remarkably uncomfortable but might have been more practical than it seems. The battle raged around him. Swords clashed, axes split air, and men screamed in the adrenaline-fueled frenzy of combat. But Håkon, he just slept. Historians still debate whether he was truly that confident in his ability to wake up and win the day, or if he didn't take it too seriously. Was it a tactical move, or simply an oddly timed moment of calm in a warrior's life? Who knows, but the fact remains that this Viking, this bold, odd Viking, was snoozing away in the heart of a battle with the world collapsing around him. The mystery of Håkon's nap continues to intrigue and puzzle historians to this day. It wasn't as bad as it sounds. After all, Håkon wasn't your average Viking. He was the son of Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, and had been raised in a manner that balanced the brutal violence of Viking culture with a more introspective, less bloodthirsty philosophy. It said he's more interested in peace and diplomacy than ravaging and pillaging, and maybe, just maybe, he thought a quick rest was the best way to keep his mind sharp. Who knows? Perhaps sleep is the Viking's son. But let's not dwell on our sadness. There's more to the tale than the nap of a weary warrior. You're now standing just a little ways off from the battlefield, observing the entire scene unfold. The winds pick up again, and this time, they're not so gentle. They're charged with the excitement of battle, carrying shouts and the crackle of weapons clashing in the distance. You hear the heavy thud of boots as Vikings charge past you, their armor clinking, their battle cries cutting through the air. You glance back at the warrior who's asleep, his chest rising and falling in a rhythmic, peaceful way, as if he's not bothered by the chaos surrounding him. It almost feels like you're observing someone in an odd dream, a dream that's not quite connected to the world they inhabit. This, of course, is where things get interesting. Hakon's decision to nap wasn't just bizarre. It might have been the most strategic move of the entire day. And while the rest of his forces might have been desperately trying to push through the fight, Hakon awoke at just the right moment. When he finally opened his eyes, it wasn't to the sounds of clashing swords and anguished cries. It was the eerie silence that follows when a battle is reaching its end. As the story goes, the tide of the battle shifted just as Hakon woke up, refreshed and alert, while his opponents were exhausted and desperate. Perhaps it was just good timing. Or maybe it was Hakon's brilliant tactical genius that made it happen. Historians continue to debate whether this event was an extraordinary stroke of luck or a well-planned maneuver. And here's the intriguing part. Viking warriors, often perceived as fierce and relentless, had peculiar notions about rest. It was not unusual for them to sleep between battles or even take naps during a fight. An idea that seems peculiar by modern standards, but might have been a testament to how they balanced the constant adrenaline of their lives with periods of relaxation. After all, being a Viking was a stressful business. Lots of longboats to row, settlements to raid, and battles to sleep through. Amid a battle that could change the course of a kingdom, there you are, witnessing a Viking sleep through it all. You almost feel guilty for not taking the same advice. Next time, you'll take a nap before doing anything too ambitious. But for now, let's rewind a little, back to the moment before Hakon took that well-timed nap. The Viking world wasn't always so chaotic. It had moments of bizarre calm and unusual customs that are well documented in historical texts. These customs might make you raise an eyebrow and question whether Vikings were just misunderstood poets, waiting for the right time to pick up a sword. Consider their practices in mead halls, for instance, those grand buildings that were the center of Viking social life. Here, amid the feasts and jovial laughter, warriors would often recline on their benches, drink in hand, and find moments of peace amid raucous celebration. It's not unlike the modern-day happy hour, except with more axes, less office gossip, and a lot more drinking. But we digress, don't we? Let's get back to Hakon and how his battle ended not with a crash but with a soft sigh of victory. After all, it was his rest that seemed to give him the energy to lead his people into a strategic win. Something so deeply un-Viking-like it's almost absurd. But in the end, sometimes, it's the most unassuming warriors who win the day. As you let that thought hang in the air, you realize that this narrative is not just an entertaining Viking tale but also a valuable lesson in history and strategy. The sounds of the modern world slowly drift away, replaced by the echoes of Viking horns and the soft clink of weapons. Now, let's move on because much like the Vikings themselves, this journey is far from over. Section 3. The scent of pine and damp earth lingers in the air as you continue your slow walk, feeling the cool breeze on your face. The sunlight is softer now, casting long shadows that stretch across the ground like memories of ancient battles. You feel oddly connected to this distant past, like you're walking through the remnants of a world that still has stories to tell. And it's true, every corner of history is filled with whispers, but perhaps none so strange as what lies ahead. Here's a surprise. The Viking warriors, not in their usual armor or with swords drawn, but engaged in a curious custom that defied every stereotype of brute strength. Despite their fearless reputation, Vikings had a surprising fondness for relaxation. Yes, you read that right. When they weren't raiding or sailing across vast, unpredictable seas, they were kicking back and unwinding. But before you conjure up images of Vikings sipping herbal tea and journaling by the fireplace, let's set the record straight. They weren't all about that kind of peace. But there was something undeniably calm about their approach to a good rest. For example, after a long raid or a battle where they didn't nap mid-fight like Hakon, they would retreat to their mead halls, those enormous, timber-clad gathering places that served as both social and political centers. Here they would swap stories, drink way too much, and surprisingly take long, languid naps. A Viking warrior might lie down on the wooden bench, arms folded across their chest, eyes closed, listening to the crackle of the fire in the hearth, the deep rumbles of their comrades' voices echoing in the background. And in those moments of rest, they weren't just preparing for the next battle. They were preparing for life itself. It's a topic that still sparks heated debates among historians. Did Vikings, beneath their battle-ready exteriors, have an inner life at all? Some argue that they were constantly plotting their next raid, while others believe they had a softer side, one that appreciated poetry, drinking, and the occasional nap. It's said that Viking culture held poetry in high regard. Skalds, or Viking poets, were greatly respected, and their work was often passed down through generations, like ancient bedtime stories. The thought of a Viking warrior reciting poems around the fire while their comrades slept, or took a nap amid a raid, may seem unusual at first. But poetry was not just a form of entertainment for Vikings. It was a way to preserve their history, honor their heroes, and express their deepest emotions. There's something undeniably soothing in the image of ancient warriors gently weaving words into the world as the fire flickers. You smile softly to yourself, imagining the rhythmic chant of a Viking poem, the soothing cadence matching the wind outside, the fire crackling in the hearth. It's easy to get lost in this moment, and why not? The idea of calm amidst the chaos feels comforting. But like everything in history, there's a twist. Remember that quiet Viking moment you just pictured? Well, it wasn't always peaceful. Vikings lived a life of duality, where moments of calm and rest were interspersed with the chaos of battle and raid. This balance, this acceptance of both sides of life, is a key aspect of Viking culture that is often overlooked. You hear the wind pick up once more, this time with an edge to it, like it's trying to rush you somewhere. The trees sway and creak, as if whispering secrets to one another. As you move forward, the peaceful atmosphere fades away, replaced by a strange sense of urgency. The Vikings weren't just known for their naps and poetry. No, there was a darker side to their culture, one that involved strange rituals and complex beliefs about death, the afterlife, and how to prepare for a warrior's rest. Let's delve into the enigmatic world of Viking burial practices. You might have come across the popular depiction of Viking funerals, where warriors were sent off to the afterlife in a flaming longship. However, the truth is far more intriguing. Not all Viking burials were fiery boat sends. Some were remarkably unique. The Vikings believed that death was merely a transition to Valhalla, a warrior's paradise where they could live eternally. But the preparations for this final journey were complex, to say the least. Some Vikings believed that the way you were buried had a lot to do with the way you'd spend your eternity. They had specific rituals for death, rituals that included sacrificing animals, sometimes horses or dogs, burying tools and weapons, and sometimes, believe it or not, setting up elaborate death rooms. These death rooms were essentially burial chambers, where the deceased would be surrounded by items they thought they'd need in the afterlife. Think about it. A Viking warrior's grave might have been stacked with treasure, food, and even items for relaxation, because you never know when you'll need a good nap, right? Perhaps the strange comfort of a nap wasn't just for the living. Vikings might have been preparing for sleep even after death, ensuring that their afterlife was as comfortable as possible. There's a Viking burial site in Denmark, where archaeologists uncovered a large burial mound filled with objects that could have been meant for a relaxing transition into the afterlife. This discovery provides significant evidence of Viking burial practices. A warrior's burial chamber, complete with finely crafted tools, a chair, and yes, you guessed it, pillows. The Vikings may have been ahead of their time in terms of thinking about comfort. Who would have thought? You can imagine them planning it all out. A sword, check. A shield, check. But what I could use is a pillow. Oh, and a chair. Because even in Valhalla, one must be comfortable. Historians continue to engage in a lively debate about these burial practices. Was it driven by sheer superstition, a belief that the warrior needed exactly what they had in life to transition smoothly into the next world? Or was it simply a matter of ritual? The truth remains elusive, but the image of a Viking, who fought so fiercely in life, spending their afterlife lounging on pillows and relaxing in a chair is, well, a bit amusing, isn't it? As you journey deeper into the Viking world, you begin to grasp the profound interconnectedness of sleep, rest, and death in their culture. For the Vikings, these were not distinct moments but rather intertwined in a complex tapestry of ritual and rest, of preparation and relaxation. And as the night envelopes you, you can't help but feel a strange sense of connection to these ancient people, who understood that even the mightiest warriors need their rest, whether in battle or beyond the grave. The soft hum of the wind continues, almost as if it's calling you to explore further. You walk, listening to the rustle of the trees, feeling the cool breeze against your skin, and drifting back in time, back to a world where the concepts of life, death, and rest were far from straightforward. As the story of the Vikings unfolds around you, you realize there's something deeply profound about their view of the world. A world where warriors could nap in the middle of a battle, sit with their shields, and even rest before they faced their eternal journey. The scent of pine and earth, the sound of distant waves, and the feel of the wind on your face. All these sensory details transport you to their world. Imagine a Viking, one of the fiercest warriors of his time, lounging in a mead hall, surrounded by friends and comrades. The fire in the hearth crackles as he leans back on a sturdy bench, a goblet of mead in hand, his long beard framing his face like a lion's mane. And yet, despite the boisterous revelry around him, he takes a moment to rest. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't avoidance. It was a recognition that even the toughest of warriors, with their fierce and unyielding nature, needed to replenish. Perhaps, as they sat there, silently meditating on their day, they could hear the echoes of battles long past or imagine the warriors yet to come. At times, these moments weren't just restful. They were strategic, an opportunity to regain focus before they ventured back out into the world for their next conquest. But there was a quieter side to their naps, too. Something more personal. It's said that during these brief interludes of sleep, some Vikings would experience strange, vivid dreams of Valhalla, of the gods themselves, or of journeys that would shape their futures. These dreams were believed to be prophetic, a connection to the divine. This belief in future guidance through dreams, a profound part of their culture, is sure to fascinate you, evoking a sense of mystique and wonder about their beliefs. If you were to ask any Viking what they saw in their sleep, they might have told you about the heroes they met in their dreams, those who had fallen before them, or perhaps the battles still to be won. What's fascinating about these moments is that sleep wasn't just seen as a physical necessity. It was a bridge to something greater, a space where the conscious and unconscious worlds blended in ways that helped guide their future. And as the night grows deeper and your surroundings grow quieter, it becomes easier to imagine a Viking amid a deep, strategic nap, almost as though his dreams were the actual battlefield. The darkness of night settles in, and you feel the air cool around you, the earth beneath your feet becoming even more grounded, more connected to the ancient rhythm of the world. The night always invites introspection, and in the stillness of this moment, there's a thought that lingers. What was it about sleep that seemed so important to these ancient peoples? It wasn't just that they fought for a place in history. It was that they rested for it, too. For Viking warriors, sleep wasn't merely a break from the action. It was a crucial part of their mental and physical preparation. They understood that it wasn't just about muscle and blood, it was about mindset, too. Sleep for the Vikings had layers of meaning, and one of the most peculiar customs was their belief in the sleeping spirit. Yes, you heard that right. The idea that a warrior's spirit needed rest just as much as their body did. They believed that if the spirit didn't rest, it would wander, lost to the wilds. Think about it, your soul walking in the forest, trying to find a way back to you. Not exactly the peaceful sleep you might be hoping for after a long day. And yet, to the Vikings, that wandering soul was just as serious as the battle you might face. If you don't take care of your spirit and don't rest, you risk losing your edge. So, the act of rest, whether it was a deep nap on a battlefield or a laid-back sleep in a mead hall, was about making sure that when you woke up, your spirit was recharged and ready for what lay ahead. Interestingly, this belief aligns somewhat with contemporary ideas about mental health. The Vikings, in their way, recognized that a tired mind was just as dangerous as an exhausted body. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you're constantly on the move, constantly at war, continually chasing the next conquest, it's easy to lose sight of who you are and why you're fighting. Rest, for them, wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity, a pause to reconnect with yourself. One could argue that, in their untamed way, the Vikings possessed an early understanding of the value of self-care. Picture them, wrapped in their furs and leathers, eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet comprehending that sleep could be the secret weapon they needed to stay sharp. Their mead-fueled nights weren't just about revelry. They were about recharging for whatever came next. This insight into the importance of rest, even amid their fierce lifestyle, is a testament to their wisdom. There's a certain modern irony to this. Today, when we're tired, we might reach for a quick caffeine fix, an energy drink, or some quick motivation. But what we need is what the Vikings already understood. A good nap, a moment of peace, and a reconnection with ourselves. It wasn't just about resting physically. It was about protecting that space where our mind and spirit could recalibrate and prepare for the next great adventure. The Vikings' understanding of rest is not just a historical curiosity, but a concept that remains relevant and applicable in our modern lives. As you breathe in deeply, you realize that the Vikings, with all their rough exterior and battle-hardened courage, might have been some of the earliest practitioners of rest as a strategic necessity. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't indulgence. It was simply a way of ensuring that they would never be caught off guard. Their foresight in recognizing the importance of rest is something we can all appreciate. And as the night grows quieter around you, that ancient truth settles in like the soft sound of a distant drumbeat. The cool night air seems to grow thicker now, almost as if it's holding you in this moment. The forest around you quiets, allowing the sounds of nature to settle into an intimate hush. You walk deeper into this world of ancient rest, where the lines between legend and reality blur in the most fascinating way. As the moonlight filters through the trees, you begin to sense the enigmatic allure of the Vikings' connection to sleep. It wasn't merely a physical need, it was woven into their very worldview, intricately tied to their beliefs about fate, destiny, and the divine. The Vikings believed in the Norns, three influential female figures who controlled the fates of all beings. They were the weavers of life's threads, spinning, cutting, and knotting the fate of every warrior, every shield maiden, and every child born in the Viking world. These Norns were often depicted as sitting at the base of the world tree, Yggdrasil, working their magic as the world turned around them. The strange thing? To the Vikings, sleep was often seen as a moment where your soul could briefly escape its fate, slipping away into the realm of the gods. In the quiet of the night, with the fire flickering in front of you, you start to understand that to the Vikings, sleep wasn't merely a pause in time. It was a window into the unseen, a space where the Norns could come into play, where destiny might shift its course, even if just for a moment. Imagine that, each time a Viking warrior closed their eyes to rest, they were briefly in the hands of these ancient beings. Who knows what guidance or visions they might have received in the stillness of sleep. Maybe they woke up with a clearer vision of what was to come, or perhaps they'd been allowed to escape the relentless pressures of their world. And let's not forget the dreams. Oh, the dreams. While the idea of prophetic dreams may seem like the stuff of myth, the Vikings truly believed in their significance. A warrior who dreamt of a great battle was considered to be receiving a divine message. But not all dreams were welcomed. Dreams of failure or dishonor were believed to foretell doom or impending death. The line between waking life and the dream world was thin for these warriors, almost as if their entire existence was lived on the edge of these two realms. For a Viking, the act of sleeping wasn't just to rest the body. It was an invitation to the gods to intervene in their lives, to offer counsel or insight through dreams. And so, each time they closed their eyes, it wasn't just a moment of respite. It was a chance for fate to shift, even if only for a brief, quiet moment. Imagine that kind of pressure. No wonder they made sure to nap properly. While this seems like an ancient, somewhat magical belief, it isn't too far removed from how we think about dreams today. How many times have we woken up after a strange dream, only to wonder if it meant something more? Perhaps we, too, share a lingering sense that sleep might be a doorway into something beyond our understanding. An opportunity to glimpse the future, or at least, rest the mind long enough to face another day. In this shared experience, we find a connection to the Vikings and their beliefs. But the Vikings were far from passive in this belief. They weren't just waiting for their dreams to tell them what to do. They actively sought out knowledge and guidance through rituals and practices designed to shape the future. Sleep, for them, wasn't something that just happened. It was a tool, a weapon in their quest to understand the mysteries of their world. And even in their quietest moments, while the fires burned low, the warriors knew that the Norns were still at work, inspiring them to shape their destinies actively. As you journey deeper into the Viking world, the landscape seems to transform around you. The wind picks up again, whistling through the branches, as if urging you to keep walking. You continue down the shadowed path, your mind still buzzing with images of those dream-filled nights and the gods that haunted them. But there's one more aspect to the Viking approach to sleep that we must explore. An aspect that speaks to their ultimate resilience and their understanding of life's fragility. Their relationship with the Berserkers, a group of warriors deeply ingrained in the cultural and historical fabric of the Viking society. Berserkers were warriors unlike any other. Fiercely loyal, relentless in battle, and, quite frankly, terrifying. They were said to fight with the ferocity of wolves or bears, and their strength and rage were legendary. But what you might not know is that these warriors, these sleep-deprived warriors, often went into battle in a trance-like state. And some of this trance was induced not solely by strength, but by their unique approach to sleep and its absence, a practice that holds significant historical weight in the Viking world. You see, the Berserkers were known to practice a sort of sleep deprivation ritual, a method by which they would stay awake for days, sometimes weeks, preparing for the intensity of battle. They would engage in these almost monastic, sleep-starved states, hoping to tap into a heightened state of awareness. In their minds, sleep was both an ally and a foe. Too much of it could dull the edge of their focus, but too little could render them vulnerable to the ravages of fatigue. They would enter a frenzy of exhaustion, working themselves into a near-manic state of energy. When the battle commenced, their unique approach to sleep and its absence would manifest in their ferocious and nearly unstoppable nature. But when it was over, the Berserkers would fall into deep, almost catatonic sleep, completely drained of their energy. Their bodies would shut down, forcing them into a state of recovery that would, in some cases, last days. This dichotomy of rage and restlessness is perhaps one of the strangest aspects of Viking life. The Berserkers, in particular, seemed to live on the edge of exhaustion and intense combat, straddling the line between wakefulness and sleep in ways that few others could comprehend. Now, this peculiar practice of sleep deprivation has been examined through modern psychology, providing insights into the psychological and physiological effects of such extreme sleep deprivation. It's not a sustainable way of living. However, the Vikings, particularly the Berserkers, were driven by something far beyond the need for rest. They were driven by a belief that their inner power could only be unlocked by pushing themselves to the limits. Perhaps that's why they were so desperate for sleep when the frenzy of battle was over. And so, you find yourself walking along this path, contemplating how the Berserkers' sleep rituals seem to contrast so sharply with Hakon the Good's calm, midday nap. It's almost like two extremes of the Viking world, one of quiet preparation, the other of reckless, desperate fury. Yet, in both cases, sleep, or the lack of it, was a powerful force, one that shaped their fate and their place in history. As you walk, you feel the world shifting beneath you, as if the very earth is guiding you toward understanding these ancient practices that, in their way, made the Vikings who they were. The winds have quieted now, and the air feels heavy with the weight of time. It's a strange sensation, as though the moment has stretched into something larger, something timeless. As you continue down this shadowy path, your mind lingers on the idea of these ancient warriors, their fierce strength, their strange rituals, and their equally strange need for rest. The Vikings, after all, were not just warriors. They were poets, dreamers, and even mystics in their own right, and their relationship with sleep revealed a deep complexity to their character. Sleep, in many ways, was a form of renewal for the Vikings. It was a practice so essential that even the mightiest warriors couldn't afford to neglect it. But there's more to Viking sleep than just physical rest. It was deeply rooted in their spiritual lives, serving as a connection to the gods and a belief in dreams as a form of divine communication. Consider the Norse god Odin, the chief of the gods, who was a curious figure in Viking culture. He was a god of war and wisdom, but he was also deeply connected to the idea of sleep and dreams. Odin, in particular, had a complicated relationship with rest. He was said to be able to enter a deep sleep to gain wisdom, but his sleep was always connected to sacrifice. It wasn't just about rest. It was about understanding, sacrifice, and the gaining of knowledge. Odin gave up one of his eyes in exchange for a drink from the well of wisdom. He also hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 nights without food or water, in a kind of self-imposed sleep, to gain knowledge of the runes. When Odin slept, his dreams weren't just ordinary dreams. His sleep was a gateway to the divine, a place where the barriers between the gods and mortals dissolved, allowing the gods to communicate their will to those who were open enough to listen. So, when a Viking warrior lay down to rest, it wasn't just a physical reprieve. It was a chance for communication with the gods themselves. These dreams were revered as visions, as glimpses into the very fabric of the world. The act of sleeping was a powerful means of stepping into the divine realm, a sacred act that connected the warrior to the forces that shaped their destiny. Sleep, in this sense, wasn't just a necessity. It was a way of communing with the gods, of receiving guidance, and of preparing for the next great battle, whether in the physical world or the realm of the soul. The idea that sleep could be a doorway to divine insight was a powerful concept that deeply permeated Viking life, shaping their approach to battle strategy and spiritual readiness. As you walk further into this ancient world, you might find yourself wondering, did the Vikings view sleep the way we do today? Was it simply a chance to recharge? Or did they see it as something more, something sacred, something that connected them to the gods themselves? Their approach to sleep, full of rituals and meaning, suggests that they believed it was much more than rest. It was a spiritual act, a necessary step on the journey of life and death, a way of receiving divine wisdom that could shape their fates. The Vikings' reverence for sleep was profound, underscoring the depth of their spiritual connection. The air has grown thick with the scent of earth and the distant whisper of ancient rituals. As you walk through this time-bending forest, the Viking world continues to unfurl before you, each layer revealing something new, something unexpected. Sleep, once just a physical necessity, now takes on an even more profound significance in the Viking way of life. It was a bridge between the mundane and the divine, a time to connect with gods and spirits, and a way to prepare for the uncertainties that lay ahead. The Vikings' approach to sleep, beyond their spiritual beliefs, was also unusual and fascinating, adding a layer of intrigue to their culture. If you were to visit a Viking home, or more specifically, their sleeping arrangements, you might find yourself surprised by how simple they were. Forget fluffy mattresses and the promise of perfect pillows. The Vikings didn't have time for such luxuries. Instead, they slept on hard wooden planks, covered with a thin layer of straw or furs. This practical approach, devoid of modern comforts, showcases the Vikings' resourcefulness and their ability to prioritize function over luxury. However, it wasn't just the surface they slept on that was curious. The Vikings believed that the location of their sleep was deeply significant. They didn't just settle down anywhere. They slept in places that were considered to be sacred, often near the hearth, which was the heart of the home. The hearth was not just a source of warmth. It was a spiritual symbol, the center of family life and community. It's said that a Viking warrior would often sleep near the hearth to remain connected to the family, the fire, and the life force of the home. But it didn't stop there. Viking sleeping arrangements were also designed with a particular level of functionality. You see, the Vikings had an ever-present need to be ready for battle, to be alert, and to rise quickly if danger approached. So, when it came to sleep, their beds, or lack thereof, were designed for quick action. Their resting places were close to their weapons, which were often hung on the walls within arm's reach. Sleep for the Vikings wasn't about escaping from the world. It was about being prepared to dive back into it at any moment. Imagine being a Viking warrior, lying on a cold, hard floor, covered in furs, with your sword just a few inches away. There would be no snoozing in the middle of the night, no leisurely drifting into dreamland. You'd need to remain alert, always ready for the call to arms. And if you slept too soundly, well, that might be seen as a luxury you couldn't afford. The idea was simple. Sleep lightly, sleep strategically. The ultimate purpose wasn't to rest as we think of it today. It was to be ready for whatever came next, underscoring the intense and constant readiness that was a part of the Viking way of life. This strategic sleep arrangement might sound harsh, even uncomfortable by modern standards. Yet, it's a stark reminder of the Viking mindset. Their entire world was built on the necessity of readiness. You might sleep, but you always had to be prepared to spring into action at a moment's notice. In a world of constant battle, raids, and shifting alliances, there was no room for deep, undisturbed sleep. It was a luxury reserved for the dead, not the living. And so, while you walk through this quiet forest now, with your mind still buzzing from the Viking customs, you can't help but wonder, what would it have been like to live in such a world, where sleep wasn't a refuge but a brief pause before the next challenge? You can almost feel the weight of those planks beneath you, the cold air, and the distant echo of battle cries in the night. The Vikings didn't just live for the day, they lived for the next moment, and sleep was always just a temporary pause before they sprang back into action. As the world of the Vikings unfolds around you, the sense of quiet intensity deepens. The night feels heavy now, but not in an oppressive way. Instead, it's the kind of weight that suggests something is about to be revealed. You feel the ancient rhythm of the world beneath your feet, and with each step, the Viking world grows more vivid, more real, as if it's waiting for you to understand the final piece of this fascinating puzzle. Discovering the unique nature of Viking sleep practices, you realize that for them, sleep was far from ordinary. It was a realm where the gods could communicate, dreams could shape destinies, and preparation for battle was a constant, even during moments of rest. But what about the Vikings' relationship with sleep beyond their physical and spiritual needs? What role did sleep play in their social lives and their culture? As you delve deeper into the Viking world, you come to understand that they were not just warriors, but also skilled traders, shipbuilders, farmers, and settlers. They lived in close-knit communities where everyone had a role to play, and this sense of community extended even to their approach to sleep. A night in a Viking settlement would reveal their communal sleeping arrangements. Unlike our modern, individualistic sleep setups, Vikings didn't have private bedrooms, unless they were very wealthy. Instead, families and entire households would sleep in the same large, open spaces, often in longhouses with massive communal hearths at their center. These sleeping arrangements were not just a matter of tradition, but also a practical response to the dangers of their world. In a world where danger could strike at any moment, there was comfort in proximity. Sleeping in close quarters meant you were always surrounded by family, friends, and even your weapons, which were kept close at hand. But beyond the practicality of it, there was a deeper social meaning to this arrangement. Sleep, in the Viking world, wasn't just about individual rest. It was about community rest, a shared experience of vulnerability and safety. Picture this: a longhouse lit by the flickering glow of a fire, the scent of smoke and earth filling the air. The floor is covered in straw and furs, and families sleep side by side, the sounds of snoring and murmured conversations blending with the crackling of the fire. It's a quiet, peaceful moment, yet one that's constantly on the edge of being interrupted by the next raid or the next journey. You can almost hear the gentle rhythm of breathing, the steady pulse of life continuing in this tight-knit space. Even in these moments of closeness, there was a sense of restless readiness. The Vikings never truly left their warrior mindset behind. Even when they were sleeping, there was a reason that the Viking longhouses were built to be as defensible as possible, with only one or two narrow entryways and small, easily secured doors. The Vikings knew that while they rested, they were never entirely safe. So, the community slept together, shared the vulnerability, and then, when the time came, woke together to face the next challenge. In this way, sleep for the Vikings was more than just a personal experience. It was a cultural phenomenon. It was a collective one, deeply tied to their social bonds. It was about being part of something larger, about sharing the weight of the world. And as you walk through this ancient world, you can't help but feel the pull of those deep connections. The sense that each moment, each breath, each nap taken in the longhouse was woven together in a grand, shared tapestry of Viking life. The wind, now a gentle caress, weaves through the trees, a stark contrast to the echoes of battle that once reverberated through this land. The serene landscape, once a battleground alive with the cries of warriors and the relentless call to arms, now stands in peaceful stillness. Yet, even amidst the chaos of the past, sleep was a constant companion, a respite, an escape, and a necessary part of the Viking journey. But now, as the night deepens and the forest grows quieter, you're left with one last question. What did sleep mean to the Viking mind? Was it merely a time to recharge the body, or was there a profound connection, a thread that tied them to the very fabric of the universe itself? To answer that question, we must delve into the concept of the afterlife, a belief as intricate and layered as any Viking battle. The Vikings saw the journey after death as equally, if not more, significant than the life they led. For them, there were numerous potential endings to a warrior's story, and sleep, in a way, was a rehearsal for death. They believed that death was not an end, but a transition to another realm, where warriors would continue their journey. And what better way to ready themselves for that eternal voyage than by practicing sleep? Now, don't misunderstand. This wasn't sleep as we know it today, peaceful, restorative, and often too comfortable. For the Vikings, sleep was a form of preparation, a practice for the ultimate rest. They would ensure that their souls were ready to join the gods, to fight again in Valhalla, or to undertake whatever challenges awaited them in the afterlife. The very act of sleeping was seen as a way of embracing the unknown, of stepping into the darkness and trusting that they would awaken again, whether in the halls of the gods or the cold, dark earth. Their sleep was purposeful, a mindful preparation for the next phase of their journey, a stark contrast to our modern view of sleep as a passive, restful state. This unique approach to sleep was deeply rooted in their belief system, where sleep was not just a physical necessity but a spiritual and mental preparation for the afterlife. In many ways, the Vikings lived their lives as though they were always preparing for death. They fought and loved fiercely, lived with a deep sense of honor and purpose, and then, when the time came, they lay down to sleep, perhaps not just to rest but to prepare. They slept as a way of saying goodbye, but also as a way of saying, "I'll see you again," knowing full well that death wasn't the end. Sleep, for them, was as much a transition as death itself. As you walk deeper into this Viking world, you can almost feel the weight of their belief in the afterlife, the knowledge that sleep, as fleeting and temporary as it may seem, was also part of a much grander journey. And when they rested, whether on the battlefield or in the longhouses, they weren't just waiting. They were preparing for the next great adventure, one that would carry them beyond this world into whatever lay beyond the horizon. The night has grown quieter still, and the air is now thick with the weight of history, as though the very atmosphere is holding its breath. You walk through the calm, your thoughts lingering on the Vikings, their dreams, and the deep connection between their lives and their beliefs. The wind, once strong, now barely stirs, and everything around you feels suspended in time. The stories you've heard and the customs you've learned are starting to form a fuller picture of what it meant to be a Viking. A people who walked the fine line between rest and readiness, between life and death, between sleep and the unknown. As you continue through the forest, a new thought enters your mind. The Vikings weren't just unique in how they approached sleep. They were pioneers, deeply connected to their physical environment. Their sense of rest was intricately tied to the land on which they lived, and their culture was so deeply embedded in nature that even their sleep was a reflection of the world around them. The rugged landscape they inhabited, full of harsh winters, rolling seas, and dense forests, shaped not only their waking lives but also their dreams. Their pioneering spirit in their approach to sleep evokes a sense of admiration for their deep connection to nature. This connection to nature was not just physical, but also spiritual and mental. The harshness of their environment was reflected in their approach to sleep, where even in rest, they remained connected to the world they lived in, fostering a deep respect for their culture and its unique perspective on sleep. Imagine for a moment what it must have been like to sleep in such an unforgiving landscape. The wind howls outside the longhouse, the scent of the sea mixing with the chill of the snow, and the ground beneath you is firm, unyielding. Yet, in that discomfort, there's a kind of connection to the world around you, a direct relationship between the earth beneath you and the dreams that might come to you as you sleep. The Viking way of life was shaped by survival, and in many ways, their sleep patterns reflected that survival instinct. There was no space for indulgence or softness. Even in sleep, they were tied to the world they lived in. This connection to their environment, the rugged landscape they inhabited, marked by harsh winters, rolling seas, and dense forests, evokes a sense of awe and respect for their culture and their unique approach to sleep. The Vikings, in a sense, understood that the world itself was a restless entity. The seas they sailed upon were constantly shifting. The mountains they climbed never stayed still, and even the winds seemed to change direction without warning. The constant motion of their world found its way into their approach to sleep. They couldn't afford to sleep too deeply, too comfortably, because the world around them never stopped moving. To rest was to acknowledge that rest wasn't permanent. It was simply a momentary pause before the inevitable next challenge. This understanding of the restless world can inspire and motivate, as it highlights their resilience and adaptability. Yet there was beauty in this. The Vikings, despite their tumultuous lives, saw sleep as a necessary balance to their ever-moving world. It was a brief moment of stillness, a pause where they could reconnect with their spirits, their gods, and their destiny. And as the night deepens around you, you realize that strangely, their restless world shaped a uniquely profound approach to sleep. A sleep that was neither passive nor indulgent, but full of purpose, connection, and preparation for the next adventure. The air is colder now, and you can feel the deepening silence surrounding you as the world begins to slow, almost like a lullaby itself. It's in these final moments of reflection that you start to understand just how deeply the Vikings lived their lives with purpose. Even their rest was deliberate, shaped by an understanding that sleep was not just an escape, but an integral part of their existence. And perhaps, in their world, where life and death were intertwined so intimately, sleep was just another step in the great cycle. A cycle they believed was always moving forward, whether in this life or the next. The Vikings didn't just sleep to rejuvenate, they slept to prepare. They understood that life's challenges weren't temporary. They were ongoing, relentless, and filled with unknowns. Sleep for them was a form of strategic respite. It was a time to reset, to listen for the subtle whispers of the gods, and to be ready for the next battle, the next journey, or the next dream. Their lives were defined by movement, by action, but also by this paradoxical understanding. Rest is just as essential as action. In the quiet moments, you start to feel that same sense of purpose. The world around you, once full of noise and distraction, now feels aligned with the rhythms of Viking life. You, too, realize that even in your own life, full of its battles, challenges, and triumphs, sleep is not just a break. It's an opportunity to reconnect with your purpose, your story, and the broader context of your life's journey. Just as the Vikings once rested in preparation for their futures, you, too, can rest, knowing that the pause you take now is a necessary part of what's to come. And yet, you also understand that the Vikings were right about something. Life doesn't stop moving, and neither does time. The world is constantly changing, always shifting, and rest is merely a moment of reprieve before the next challenge. But there's no need to rush. There's no need to hurry. For tonight, you'll allow yourself to be still, to breathe in the quiet, and to feel connected to the eternal rhythm of the world. The moon is now high in the sky, casting a soft, silvery glow across the landscape. Everything feels suspended in this moment, timeless, still, and full of possibility. You've walked through the Viking world, learned of their strange customs, their warrior ethos, and their profound relationship with sleep. And as you stand here, on the edge of this ancient world, you feel an overwhelming sense of calm. The forest, the wind, the distant sea, all of it seems to breathe with you, as though the very earth is joining in your quiet reflection. Sleep, for the Vikings, was never just about rest. It was about preparation. It was about understanding the balance between the physical and the spiritual, between the known and the unknown. They didn't just sleep to escape. They slept to prepare for what came next. And perhaps, in that strange Viking way, they understood something that we often forget in our own busy, bustling lives. That rest is not just a pause, but an essential part of the journey itself. As you stand here, listening to the gentle rustling of the leaves, you realize that rest, proper rest, has a quiet power. It's not about escaping from the world, but about reconnecting with it. And maybe that's something we can all take from the Vikings. In their fierce, untamed world, they knew that to be truly ready for life's challenges, they needed to rest. They needed to recharge, to listen, and to prepare for what lay ahead. With that thought, you take a deep breath, allowing the quiet to settle over you. There's no rush, no urgency, just the calm, steady rhythm of life moving around you. And as you slowly drift off into your peaceful sleep, you carry with you the spirit of the Vikings, rested, ready, and prepared for whatever comes next. Now, the story ends not with a bang, but with a quiet, soothing sigh, as the world of the Vikings fades into the background, and you slip into your world of dreams. Sleep tight,